Mr. Manmohan Singh was extremely friendly. Mr. Modi is different because he is an excellent orator, he has a brilliant memory, very definitive about what he wants to say. There's a two major contrasts between the two leaders who are in the 10 years apart from each other. But the image of the leader plays a very important role. Whoever expected that Mr. Manmohan Singh would be the Prime Minister?
True.
I think the Kashmiris are not yet at peace with India.
What would be one advice that you would like to give Rahul Gandhi?
That he doesn't have a good team. Get a good team. That's a concern. Get a good team together, and I think there is enough. But to deal with the Modi is not an easy thing.
നമസ്കാരം. നമ്മളോടൊപ്പം ഇന്നുള്ളത് ഏറെ വിശേഷതകളുള്ള ഒരു അതിഥിയാണ് ശ്രീ M.K. നാരായണൻ. ഇന്ത്യയുടെ നാഷണൽ സെക്യൂരിറ്റി അഡ്വൈസറായിരുന്ന അദ്ദേഹം പിന്നീട് ബംഗാൾ ഗവർണറായിരുന്നു. ഇന്ന് ഒരു പക്ഷേ ഇന്ത്യക്കും ലോകത്തിനും ഇടയിലുള്ള പല കാര്യങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ച് വളരെ ഡീപ്പ് ഇൻസൈറ്റ്സോടുകൂടി സംസാരിക്കാൻ കഴിവുള്ള ഒരു വ്യക്തി അദ്ദേഹമാണ്. കൂടാതെ ഇന്ന് ഇന്ത്യ നേരിടുന്ന പ്രത്യേക സാഹചര്യങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ചും നമുക്കിന്ന് അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് ചോദിക്കാം. താങ്ക് യു മിസ്റ്റർ M.K. for joining us.
Thank you. Thank
India
you for having me. Yeah.
It's our pleasure, sir. 2023, India saw a real roller coaster ride, so to speak, in diplomacy. We were the chair of G20 and there's a lot of halo about it. But we wake up in 2024 seeing smaller countries like Maldives threatening us to remove our army units from there with a deadline. So do you think G20 didn't do that much good for India?
No, I would like to say that G20 was an expression of what I would call the world's faith in India and its leadership. But I think it does not give us an exalted status in any case, because many of the things are natural. Once you became a member of G20, it was only a matter of time that you would have the presidentship of G20. Our current penchant for sort of building up our hopes and ambitions about things probably played a little out into the open. But the fact that a country like India could become the chair of G20 is certainly a feather in our cap. But please remember that the previous leadership of G20 also came from a so-called third world or second world countries. So I don't want to put too much emphasis on G20, excepting that we made a great success of G20 and the world recognized that it was an event of great magnitude.
But to my second part of my question, sir, about the countries like in the Indian Ocean littoral.
There is always a certain amount of what are called angst as well as support for what you do. Maldives, we had I would say, a troubled relationship from time to time. This is not the first time. When Gayoom was the president, our relations were excellent.
Yes.
Then when Gayoom fell out of favor or lost the election, etc., you had a new government which was not so well disposed of it. Then we had Nasheed, who was very pro-India. So there's been a bit of a roller coaster kind of attitude. And small countries always have a feeling that the bigger countries are trying to exercise undue influence. And maybe to some extent we could say that our diplomacy has not been even-handed in these matters. I'm sure that his predecessor was made much of by us, and therefore, if you have been sort of out of favor with India, when you come to power, you take it out. There's no way that the Maldives can survive without India. I think I think every Maldivian politician and person knows that. You can. It's a great place for tourism. It's great, but without India, you can't. And all countries like to play India versus China. Unfortunately, our relations with China are not of the best, and therefore it's possible to do so. But I think the old tactics. I know Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru is not the favorite at the moment. The policy of maintaining equidistance was important, and I think if once the India-China relations improve, which I think they should, the smaller countries will not be able to play. It's the same game. In our lives also, that's what the smaller players like to play, one big boy against the other sort of stuff. I think it's not comfortable for us to have pinpricks like this from a country like Maldives, but I think Maldives will come to.
But on the world stage, such posturing by even smaller countries, doesn't that sort of eclipse India's power?
I don't think that is so. I mean, most of the if you ask most Westerners, I mean, when you say the world here, they see Maldives only as a destination for a holiday. Ask them who the president of the country is, what his policies are. I don't think that is. I've been in various international meetings earlier. You have to tell them where Maldives is on the map. So I don't think that's a very important point. But we always had a reputation of being friendly with our neighbors. At times it works, at times it doesn't work. And we were very comfortable with Maldives and Gayoom was there because we gave them all the help they needed. But there have been, so when democracy or what do you call, parliamentary politics becomes important, when a new party comes to power, the first thing it does is, what do I do which is different from my predecessor party? So I think it's not very much to.
But do you agree to a point that somewhere we have not still defined a relation with China, in the sense, where do we want to be strategically?
That's a big question, and I'll take it. I don't think I'm on the same side as most people on this. And I think I know China better than most people. I was also for 6 years the special representative for border talks with China. My point really is that the two Asian giants have to live in peace. And we certainly had a period when Hu Jintao was the president. I mean, there are earlier periods also, but when I think the two countries maintained a certain amount of a comfortable relationship. The point really is that neither China or India will recognize the other as superior. The Chinese always they would like to have excellent relations with India, provided India accepts that we are number one, you are number two. I remember when talking to Dai Bingo, who was my counterpart from time to time, and he said, MK, you really think you're the equal of China? And I said, you ought to be happy that I don't say we are superior to China, because I said that's the way the Indian civilization works. We don't want to dominate somebody else, kind of. But the point really is, deep down at every point, the Chinese think they're a superior civilization. It's a civilization conflict. I mean, I think the West would like us probably to have a conflict, I mean, with guns and whatnot. The point is, which is the model that the world should follow? That's what the kind of stuff. The Indian democratic model, much more open, less sort of, what should I say, progressive in terms of your GDP or whatnot, but one which the world can live with comfortably. The Chinese want to dominate. So that is the conflict. I think it behoves the leaders on both sides to ensure that they don't have a conflict, because that would be catastrophic for both China and India.
And we realize that also.
I think, doesn't matter which government is in power in Delhi. I think we do that, but I think sometimes we go a little out of sync because
I think all this melts down to our domestic politics. Whether we went weak against China, we are strong against China. So you see the different political ideologies playing this.
May I interrupt at this point? Please. I don't think it's domestic politics. It's the kind of feeling that you want to tell the rest of the world. It's like two boxes in a ring. You want to prove to the audience that I'm as good as them. And actually, there is no real conflict between India and China. If you go across, if you are looking for the West is looking only for a market. It's always been the case. China was a huge market, and China is maybe still, but now probably with the Chinese economy coming down and all the other tensions. So now India is the biggest market that they have in the world. So I think we should not fall into the.
So can you clarify that bit? You said there is no major conflict between India and China.
Excepting civilization.
Right.
There is no territorial conflict. Okay, there are some issues on the border, etc. All countries which are bordering countries have problems about where the border lies. Unfortunately for us, Indians, we're all Indians, we realize that we don't write anything on paper. I mean, for those of us who are Hindus, the Ramayana was never written for us. It was all hand me down by your forefathers to you. So, same as where do our borders lie? For instance, quite often it's unclear.
Your one person has walked on the border.
I walked. No, you can't walk on the border. I walked some. So it's very difficult to say which is your border, which is their border. but the Chinese are great map makers, and the Chinese, for every dynasty, they have a map. And so they have what do you call, a
Clear
map,
understanding.
whether that's their territory or somebody else's territory, I don't know. But they do have. So it's really a question of how you manage your relationship. I mean, you can agree to disagree rather than use your guns on the. And regarding border conflicts, you have to live. You have to be on the border. The border is you put a lot of stones
Right,
to
right.
overnight. The other party removes the stones and puts some other stones. So I think it's a matter of, if there's good relations between Beijing and Delhi, then all this doesn't
These are being extrapolated to a
kind of
large.
thing. And then once something happens, then you have a domestic audience to deal with. How
But sir, one question here is: do you think India has been wrongly drawn into the Quad or the AUKUS, into the AUKUS discussion? Because all that said they are going to combat China in the Indo-Pacific. So do you think we should have been more level-headed in dealing with those?
That's a loaded question, because that's a loaded question. I for one, but I don't know if it's right or wrong. I do not see any particular advantage for us to be in the Quad. I will answer it that way, because I think I'm old enough now to probably one of the oldest to look at these issues. I don't think we have great interest in the Indo-Pacific. We have a great deal of interest in the Indian Ocean. And what we need to do in the Indian Ocean is different from what partnership in Quad. I mean, we're not part of AUKUS, but part of the
We're
Quad.
not part of
The
AUKUS.
Quad is partly for the Pacific. Now, that's not of course, all areas are important, but it's not an area of vital interest to India. And there's no I don't see at any time India joining any group to fight a battle in the Pacific, whether it's against China or some other country. So I don't see a particular advantage with Quad. But there may have been other compelling reasons which I'm not aware of, because I've been out of the mainstream policy making for quite some time. But this idea of having an understanding of this kind has remained for a long time. And during the Manmohan Singh years and even earlier, we deliberately not allowed ourselves to be part of it, whatever might be the window dressing that might have been put to it. So I don't see a particular advantage with Quad. It could be a disadvantage, because if there is, God forbid, a conflict between the United States and China,
China.
what would be our position? If you're part of Quad, then we will inevitably be asked to. If you don't, then people say, "What is this? You are part of it." So, I see the Quad as a situation where or a body that doesn't give us any benefit, but it could turn out to our detriment.
Do you think we are into too many of these, formations? Like we just announced the IME Europe, India Middle East Europe corridor.
I think that I think our diplomats in the world, diplomats love this more than the policy makers, and they build up all the various things, not knowing what will happen. Then it goes out of favor for some time or the other. They have limited utilities. I mean, take the Abraham Accords in the Middle East. I mean, it became a very major thing. And the leadership, the US leadership at this time, or the leaders of countries, looked upon it as a great unit. We have seen it crumbled like a house of cards. So all accords have a very limited
Lifespan.
lifespan, and not even a lifespan, not limited value, I would say. Yes, for a certain amount of time, it gives you a feeling that you are on top.
It's an illusion, basically.
Illusion. I don't. I think that's too strong. I don't want to say it's an illusion. It's a reality, but it's all realities have dented by what you call the facts on the ground, and it all depends what happens.
So do you mean to say there's some sort of a mismatch between the policies of the country or the where we should go and the diplomatic pursuits?
No, you see, at any one time, it's even more ephemeral than I would say the economy from time to time. At a particular moment in time, I mean, we are all talking about the United States and India's relationship. I mean, you have to live through the years to realize the India-US nuclear deal is significant, not so much for the nuclear deal alone, but it gave a completely different approach that the United States suddenly realized, oh, India is important. India is there. Till then, they've always treated India as a second or third world country. which was not of much consequence. They didn't have guns and fighting. They were not buying their equipment, etc. So its perception is a very important point. As India's economy has improved, as India's approach to world problems have altered or changed, particularly I would say the West, the United States and whatnot, started looking at India. And then what happens is at that point you start feeling, yes, we have reached the heights that we need to reach in diplomacy, and therefore you take certain steps. Some of them turn out to be good, some others are not so good. So I think it's a kind of a jigsaw puzzle. How do you fit your policies to your realities on the ground?
No, we are at a point in time when we can clearly demarcate 2 decades in diplomacy, 10 years under Mr. Manmohan Singh and now 10 years under Mr. Modi. So how do you compare these 2 decades?
That's a loaded question, but since I've allowed myself to be inveigled to be interviewed, see, a great deal of a country's policies are dictated by the quality of the leader. And you have two leaders, Mr. Manmohan Singh at one stage and Mr. Modi. No, not that they sort of manage the policy totally, but the image of the leader plays a very important role. I may be accused of being what I might call unduly favorable to Mr. Manmohan Singh. But you must understand the way the world leaders treated Mr. Manmohan Singh. He was not a politician. He was hardly a leader in that sense. But he was seen as somebody who was an extraordinarily fine individual, a very intelligent leader. I'll sum this up in one word. When the meeting that I won't talk. No, I'll talk of the relationship between him and Mr.
Bush.
Bush. Yeah, there. But I want to. When we met, after all the Bush period was over, when Barack Obama became the president, the first meeting. That was also the first time a state visit was given to an Indian leader. I mean, we've heard a lot about the state visit to Modi this time, but that was the first state visit. At that meeting, there was what I call a meeting with the two leaders, two aides. I was lucky to be the aide on the Indian side. Manmohan Singh was talking to Mr. Obama with saying, talking to him in great this and that. Mr. Obama says, Mr. Manmohan Singh, please stop. You are my guru, and I shall go by what you say. So, I mean, that sums up thing.
In relation with any particular subject or in...
No, this is what they opened the subject. Mr. Manmohan Singh is always gracious. He talks in kind of saying how nice it was been invited, etc. That man just said, "You're my guru." I think it sums up everything. If you would say that in your interview with me, I'll be pleased. It sums up what you call the image, and the image of the Prime Minister then translate, or the image of the country translate to that of the Prime Minister. But in this case, I think Manmohan Singh's approach to issues had already created an impact. And I want to go, taking off from that, I think the India-US nuclear deal, many of us claim credit for being part of it. But I think it was done between Mr. Bush and Mr. Manmohan Singh. Mr. Bush always said, Manmohan is a good man. I want to help him. You know, there are a lot of things that I don't want to go into the detail, but this is the image. So we had the image of a leader who was highly respected, like in the old days, like the gurus and rishis and whatnot kind of stuff. But Mr. Manmohan Singh, if you ask me for one particular sentence that stands out in what we had in all the discussions and whether he ever set the Adriatic on fire or no, I can't think of it. Unlike Mr. Modi.
So you would say he was the real Vishwaguru and not the way Mr. Modi is being stamped now.
Yeah. I mean, they're two different individuals. I mean, Mr. Manmohan Singh hates being, even if he was a Vishwaguru, he would hate being called a Vishwaguru. He doesn't like it.
So this is quite disproportionate to the flamboyance, you mean. On the world stage, the presence of a leader is quite proportionate. We has tried to assume a proportion.
Maybe, but look at it. I want to say, under no other leader could we have got the India-US nuclear deal. I mean, most of us have worked on it, but since I was the closest in that point of view, I know that if Mr. Bush did not want to give it to India, not because of India, but because of Manmohan Singh, this would never have happened. And every time we had a problem, myself and my counterpart, Steve Hadley, who was the national, when we went to saying that the State Department was objecting, Department of Energy is objecting this clause, that clause, etc., all that Mr. Bush would say,
But don't you think even the Congress didn't understand this value of Mr. Manmohan Singh? If we go back into a bit of domestic politics, when you say that this deal happened only because of Mr. Singh, and coming from you, that is the fact, the fact. But don't you think that the Congress didn't do a sort of proportionate respect, acknowledging him as a possible leader?
I think you know about domestic politics. I mean, Manmohan Singh was, whoever expected that Mr. Manmohan Singh would be the Prime Minister.
True.
So there was there are a lot of people in the Congress party and in the Congress leadership who felt that, this man had come in from outside and taken on what was the legitimate role of any political leader, or political ambition of any political leader. So there's a lot of the same. Then there is a whole lot of what you call the shibboleth about party politics. We said that we should not accept anything that the Americans would be willing to give because it would always be loaded, etc., etc. But clearly, the point was that he could overcome. There was a meeting, or the parliamentary party a meeting which was held, and at that meeting, a lot of people opposed the deal. That was the time there was all this talk that he may resign and all that. Mr. Manmohan Singh is no orator, he is no great thing, but the way he argued the case for the deal, it's the sincerity of the man that comes through. People are unhappy because sincerity in politics is not a great virtue. You say all kinds of lies if you want to. Sorry, I'll be criticized for this, but he was very sincere in what he wanted. And finally, he had the parliamentary party started with almost everybody against the deal. By the time the meeting was over, 70% of them were for it.
So that is a real soft diplomacy.
No, there is something about honesty and sincerity. I think Mr. Manmohan Singh, that shone through. I mean, he's a poor speaker. He doesn't make out a brilliant case, unlike the present Prime Minister, who is an excellent speaker. He captivates the audience and whatnot. So Mr. Manmohan Singh is excellent in small meetings, because then he talks softly, he never argues, he puts forward his point of view, etc. He has no grand statements to make, no sentences that stand out in your
No emotional drama.
emotion. Oh, he's very good. And many of us, I first can't say, first I met Mr. Manmohan Singh when he was holding the rank of probably an additional secretary in the government of India. Whoever thought that Mr. Manmohan Singh would one day be the Prime Minister and I would be working as his lieutenant in the... So he's a man whose image is not very high, but I think he's an ultimate persuader. He never, even with me, for instance, he disagreed with me on many things. I mean, one of our major disagreements were on Pakistan. But he never tried to sort of be harsh to me on what kind of stuff.
You wanted a strong tactics towards Pakistan.
No, he was very pro. No, he was very pro. Mr. Manmohan Singh was extremely friendly. I mean, there again it's emotional because he was born in Pakistan,
Right.
like Musharraf was born in India.
India.
But he was always saying that we must have excellent relations with Pakistan, and therefore he was willing to think of concessions which many of us were not. So that kind of but so Mr. Modi is different. Mr. Modi conveys to the world what he does, in a fashion, because he is an excellent orator, he has a brilliant memory, he is very definitive about what he wants to say. There's two major contrasts between the two leaders who are in the 10 years apart from each other. So I think that's...
But currently, you say that the US respected the Prime Minister and clinched a big deal for the country, or gave a big deal for the country. Now, currently, we see the US turning around and questioning India in the Pannu case. Suddenly on the world stage, we look a bit embarrassed. Suddenly, something has happened in Qatar where 7 officers are there. There was the other naval officer case also, which we argued in the court. So suddenly, do you think that is an overemphasis on power projection? is sort of compromising our diplomatic strategies?
No, as India's image goes up in the world, who, for instance, would like to say has anything to say against me today? When I was a national security advisor or what or not, I was quite often being attacked in the press. Nobody attacks me in the press because I'm of no consequence. But when you are of consequence, every small because there are always factions or always groups in a country which are pro or against India. Many Americans still have a very sort of critical view of India and what India stands for, though I think the Indian Americans are completely swamped, many of these people. So, and there are many people anxious to sort of point out the flaws in all kinds. Now, the Pannoon affair in the United States or the Niger affair in Canada are events that should never have happened, I concede. But long before the jury is out as to whether India was involved, many people have taken it as almost a fact that India is behind these two attacks. So it's a great deal of anger that India is becoming more important, and therefore kind of no, it's not as great as being talked about. This is what they were doing with China. Now that China is no longer of that importance now, there's less criticism in public about China. There's more on India. So I think these are all parts of the petty wrangling that goes across
But
on the.
don't you think that it's also something that contributes to such a embarrassment, so to speak, is the way the domestic politics, the BJP politics, is trying to project that as an achievement. The Niger killing in all the cyber media, the BJP cyber media, it was sort of, without saying in as many words, was said that India was behind it. So don't you think that's not good for the country?
I don't know. I'm not privy to the cyber media, so I don't know what's going on there. No, I don't know whether many people might the anger against the Khalistanis who are demeaning India and sort of is quite widespread. So it's like the kind of thing saying, okay, if this fellow was killed, well and good, somebody has killed him. Doesn't the who, why, what? It's not so much the uh, what I would call the politics or the part of it. They're happy that this fellow has been. It'll be a lesson. So I don't think it's a question of be criticizing India for having done it so much as the fact that some fellows killed him. If the Indian government not bad at all, is sort of the attitude. Like
Is it
somebody.
also because there is an attempt to make the incumbent NSA a real life hero? So Dovell is become like an avatar in espionage
See,
industry.
I would let me take sides on my one time. Well, he was my colleague. He was one of my favorite officers. He is a great operational. I think he's one of the best operatives that we in India have had. And I knew him for several years, and I think we still maintain a good equation. The point really is, I think we should not jump to the conclusion that this is a dual tactic or a dual operation. Dual is an excellent operator, and if he was behind it, then clearly it would not have been like this. That I'm sure.
Even clean and neat.
That is not. I mean, and I do think the world also knows where and what to do a thing. I would be wrong. I've been wrong very many times. I can't concede. I do not think this is an India operation in that sense of the term. It could be a rogue operation. It could be something else. It may be somebody else which has done it, and it's easy to you use an occasion saying that blame can be cast on someone else, sort of thing. But having I've been longer in intelligence. Most people are still alive. I think this doesn't look like a pre-programmed Indian or pre-programmed operation by India. I think we are capable of doing it much better off than this.
Even in Pannu's
But
case.
I think it's all there are a lot of half the problem is looking at the movies. They think that intelligence is all jumping out of the sky with three guns and shooting people and this and that. So a lot of people get carried away. No, intelligence is hard grind. I mean, many are, I for one can speak because I spent I think 40 years in the intelligence bureau over the years, and so it's a different world. And You can't say, you can't protest because you're not in the public realm. So, I I may be wrong, but I do think that.
But don't you think it's not a good thing to project Mr. Doval by the BJP politicians as a savior of India, as a Rambo of India? Don't you think that it sort of compromises the position of NSA?
I would like to say if somebody had said something good about me as NSA, they didn't. What can I do about that? So I'm and naturally, therefore, I'm jealous of the world's
Nobody knowing you would say that.
sellers. But see, people are different. I mean, all of us are. I was I was very fond of Dowell because he could do things that I couldn't. I think Dowell also has a good opinion about me because he can't. There are many things that I do which he can't. No, therefore there are two models: the Rambo model and the kind of thing. So it's whether it's good or bad is for not for me to say, but someone else to. And then of course Dolat and others also then start making some comparisons, etc. That's all
But to his
par for.
credit, people say there's not a major terror attack in the country in the last many years.
Yeah, that also is too. That's also too far-fetched. Terror attacks. No, we are better prepared for a terror attack. Terror attacks because most of the world's terror organizations are in a state of what I call disarray at the moment. They regroup, whether it is the ISIS or
ISIL,
whether it is
Taliban.
The Al Qaeda, and all the Pakistani groups. But I think that if a terror attack was being attempted now, it would be better arranged than the one that when took place in Bombay when I was the NSC. So that it's not that the absence of a terror attack is because you have a particular person or particular group of people at the top. How you handle a terror attack thereafter is much of it. I think we are much better prepared if a terror attack takes place. The other is a matter of intelligence, which comes through them. Sometimes you have good sources, sometimes you don't have it.
So, when as we say that we have successfully contained terror threat to the country,
Yeah, I would
except the
agree with
lone
that.
wolf attack, what happened in Manipur according to you? Why did we fail to detect a volcano in Manipur?
Frankly, I don't know. I mean, it 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 is a classic example because I was a desk man most of my life. I was an intelligence analyst. The issue is how well you can read these or interpret the signs on the ground. This is the biggest thing. The Hamas-Israel conflict is another classic example. You have a country which is probably the most electronically prepared for what kind of thing. They have ring fenced the Hamas. They believe that they know everything, even if there's an ant on the ground in their water. What they failed to realize was that finally intelligence is reading of the bits and pieces as they're coming out and how do you string it. You have a presumption that the Hamas cannot attack Israel. You had a presumption that Manipur is at peace. This is the biggest danger in intelligence. If you think that, or if you say what is likely to happen in many of whether it is Manipur, whether it is Assam itself,
Assam.
uh, so much is being made of the pro-talk faction of the Ulfa willing to talk. There's no very little meaning. I mean, the Paresh Barua element is still there.
Still
They
there.
will come. So you need hard sort of analysis of what's coming on the ground. I think what happens in Manipur, and I think what's happened in quite other parts of in India, rest of the world also, is that most people are unhappy about they want to use computers, they want to use this, and want to. If I might boast, since I have very little to boast of most of the time, when in 1968, when the Tet Offensive took place in Vietnam, when the North
Yeah,
Vietnamese attacked the South, I think at that time communism was the big bogey of most countries across the world. I think we in India were the only ones who sort of anticipated that that offensive would take place. Other than that, because you're reading the same facts, but how to string it together. So my point is, that hard intelligence is not merely getting something ready-made on the ground. You have to analyze it, assess it. And then there is that X factor. How do you get the X factor into the thing? There are no great victors in that. So that is going down in influence because everybody wants you on the front page today, not in the back pages.
So do you think this X factor is the reason why there's an increased attack on Indian army in Kashmir recently? Like we thought things were settling down. Suddenly you saw one ambush which really was very bad, and yet another one where the officer escaped by the skin of his teeth. So do you think there also the
We
hard
are
homework
not
is
there.
missing?
That's not so much the X factor. I think there is a certain belief that Pakistan, because Pakistan is in disarray to some extent, that attacks would come down, and then there's a wave of it. The X factor I'm saying is you have information, but how do you read between the lines there and produce that little extra to saying that what is being obvious is not really the
I
case.
get your point.
What's happening in Kashmir today is, and I cannot say I'm not there. I think there's a certain amount of lessening of our guard to some extent. They're feeling that nothing much is happening in Pakistan and this will come down. And the other side was taking advantage of that situation. But I don't read too much into it. I
Yeah,
think
but two attacks on army convoys with led by rank of an officer, a CO rank officer, it's not a good thing.
yeah, but we have also obviously let down our guard to some extent. I mean, why the armed forces will never agree with
Is that because the prime minister speaks in a higher volume and people
I
think
don't. Nee,
that
I
things
mean,
are hunky dory?
nothing. No, I think that's good for politics. And the reality is that there are people, terror groups available. They have to carry out some attacks, otherwise people start. Nobody will feed them, nobody give them money, etc., etc. So, but maybe there's a certain amount of reduction of vigil on our side. So I think that's I don't see that as a major or that the situation. But if you have to get rid of the idea that Kashmir is novel or that things have all hung. Kashmir is better than what it used to be before, but certainly Kashmir is not yet at peace.
Would the elections help Kashmir find its own peace and new relation
I think
with the country?
particularly after the Supreme Court judgment, I'm rather worried as to what the situation could be because all the wrong reasons. I mean, being an Indian rather than a Kashmirian, I think the Kashmiris are not yet at peace with India. How to bring them round it's neither a judgment or a political party. You have to win the confidence of the Kashmiris in that. It's easy to say that Article 370 was the greatest mistake that Nehru did and whatnot. You have to live through those periods. I mean, I would urge everybody who talks about this to go through the records of the discussion prior to the framing of our constitution because there is so much. You must understand the situation that existed at the time why certain decisions were taken. So Article 370 was a reality of a certain kind, and it was not possible for us to either win over the Kashmiris adequately enough, nor for that matter for us to deal with Pakistan as a factor. So these are facts of history. You can't get rid of it. You can't. You can keep
So you mean to
blaming.
say Article 370 is still relevant in a different way?
It's in the mind. Not it's not on the ground. In the mind, the kind of feeling that you have saying that we should have been independent, we should have done that. All right, I'm accepting a via media. Now suddenly you remove that also. Now I don't accept the Kashmiri viewpoint, but I know I talk to Kashmiri. This is the feeling. How to get rid of the feeling? It's like a reservation, and reservations used to be a great deal of it into the what we call the non-reserved category of people saying, why are this? I get 90%, why the 70% boy gets admitted. So there are reasons, and it's not easy to get over. Reservation comes, and in that I keep saying, please read the debate that took place in Parliament in the 47, 48, 49 period, and you'll realize why many of these reservations were necessary, why these kind of things were done. So likewise, when Kashmir this was a kind of effort at winning over the confidence of the Kashmiris who wanted independence, not so much go toward Pakistan. And so how do you deal with it? the fact that we didn't succeed in getting to overcome that feeling is maybe a major default of previous government.
Government.
But a judgment of the Supreme Court doesn't change that. This is my view.
So the haste with which this government is acting on such things, they're disconnecting past, is it?
That's because they believe that probably best thing is to let's see whether we can get complete and finish this off at the moment. Let's see, we're about to face a new round of elections, etc. Let's complete this at the moment. But
But
many
this
of
attempt to script future, forgetting past, is
no,
not a
but
good thing for the country.
you're anticipating what you would do. See, many of the arguments that are being used by the ruling dispensation now is that many of our travails are due to wrong policies in the past or your belief that things could change. Now, when they say that, they're saying, all right, we have now a Supreme Court judgment. Let's now take action immediately. But I don't think the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of people's minds and thoughts. That is a judicial decision on a particular point. So, very often you have people or political leaders, etc., who feel that the problem is ended or solved. But in politics, no problem ends over the years. It remains. You still have border disputes between Tamil Nadu
And
and Kerala,
Kerala.
kind of so.
So, sir, coming to the second part of the question which I asked earlier, and we deviated a bit on that. So, do you think that Mr. Modi, as an Indian Prime Minister, with all his sound and fury, is not making the impact that the previous Prime Ministers made?
No, no. I think Mr. Modi is making a tremendous impact. I'm t- the difference between impact and what perceptions. Now, Mr. Modi has made a tremendous impact. I think it's comparable to what Mrs. Gandhi or Jawaharlal Nehru had in many ways. I think that Manmohan Singh was nowhere in that level. Manmohan Singh was on certain policies, not an impact. If you ask many people who Manmohan Singh was, I'm quite sure they won't know. I think Mr. Modi will be remembered for a long time. Many people will hail him. Many others may berate him. That's a different matter. But he's made tremendous
But he has not
impact.
said anything about China so far. Does that mean that he is somewhere he is weak in addressing the real issue?
No, Mr. Modi doesn't address what I call India sort of idea. I mean, he comes out on particular occasions, who kind of thing. I mean, it's a good tactic, but will he leave the kind of impact on Indian politics that Nehru or Mrs. Gandhi had, or even for that matter? I don't know. But at the moment, he is a hero, and perhaps rightly so for most people, for what he's doing. I mean, he's able, and he takes full credit for everything that is taking place, something which certainly Manmohan Singh never did, and many others. Now, for instance, India's economy is thriving, somehow in people's minds entirely due to Mr. Modi. I mean, I'm not talking maybe of all that. Yeah, it's a how he does that.
Because he blatantly says it's Modi's guarantee, which no other Prime Minister ever said.
No, yeah, everything. There's only one person. There's not even sharing. You can't say that any of the other ministers. It's what I call a good way of conducting politics, maybe.
No, but don't you think it's like much like shooting a film with a hero who has a market value and nothing beyond that?
Yeah, maybe. But if sells, you finally what are you doing? You're selling the movie. You have a Shah Rukh Khan, and then you are sure the movie will sell. So that is one model. Now that's not the model that we have been accustomed to. The nearest we came to that was really Mrs. Gandhi, also over
But
the
she
years.
also didn't try to disconnect from history. Here
No,
there's an
because
attempt
she
to disconnect from
because she
history.
was a Nehru, and because she couldn't get rid of her past, and she was an extraordinary individual. I had the good fortune of getting to know her fairly well and very closely. So, but Modi is a new model. For the present, he is certainly a winner in many ways. Whether he would have the same lasting impact a few years down the road once he has stepped down, or he has whatever it is, I don't know, because there's no stamp there's no policy stamp that you can possibly indicate, excepting that he's there, he's talking, everybody remembers him. Nobody in India who can say, I do not know who is the Prime Minister of India. You ask him who, maybe Amit Shah, maybe a little bit, but no other minister has talked about it. You had Mr. Rajnath Singh, whom again I knew, who is quite an extraordinary politician, but who knows Rajnath Singh, for instance, in the sense of the. So the point really is that he has made a new.
But do you think it's good for a democracy like India with so much of, vagaries?
That's a loaded question. I don't want to
Indeed,
answer. I
indeed.
don't want to answer that because
Because you have watched many
yeah,
continuum in the
but if
democracy.
in winning elections is a very important part of of,
A politician.
of politics and politicians. And in every way, he's been a winner. It hasn't been possible to. I mean, you can run down. We have Mr. Rahul Gandhi saying he's a chota bacha, this kind of thing. Mr. Rahul Gandhi has his work cut out, and some of his ideas are better than probably what it's been badly sort of propagated. But the point is, he's up against a Goliath in that sense, and this is whether it's good politics in a democracy or not is a matter that maybe I can sit in the back room and try to think about it. But if you're in the forefront of politics, that's a winning politics.
What is the cutting edge that you find missing in Rahul, since you have worked with the grandmother also and at least known them at very close quarters? What is that cutting edge that is missing in them?
That he doesn't have a good team. See, no one person sort of can. I mean, in a democratic party kind of stuff. And I think the team is weak. You have to plan. You do need the detailed planning about what has to be done. That is missing.
Or this Jodo Yatra will not do any.
And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all whether Cayman was. I mean, there's nothing very much on that. But there is really no good team.
What would be one advice that you would like to give Rahul Gandhi?
Get a good team. That's a good start. Get a good team together, and I think there is enough. I think still support for they may not win an election, but they can do much better than what might happen. But to deal with the Modi is not an easy thing. I mean, he's what you call. It's not really a question of word. He's a demagogue in the sense that he can
Stunning
speak.
demagogue.
He can speak and he can cast a spell on the audience. And he does that. And he does that every day. He has no family, he has no this and that, he has no friends, he has no nothing. Now he's 2 days in Kerala, he will speak all the, to kind of sing, and he goes back. No other leader is able to meet.
The energy level.
Whether you ask me whether it's good for politics, in democracy or not, I don't know. But it's a winning formula.
But at least you agree that it is not the model that a country like India would want to.
Yeah, because we are all brought up in the Nehru Gandhi era, which may be good or bad, one does not know.
So you should also ensure that continuum of policies and leave some major stamp on a policy.
The opposition, the problem is what is the main thing about a democracy? You must be able to have a strong, vibrant opposition. I don't think there's an opposition today in the country. And to that extent, I would say our democracy is becoming more and more flawed. And
you have no hope in the India cobbled together, what the parties have cobbled together.
I know most of the leaders personally. They can't work as a team. I mean, it's just not possible. They will squabble over everything else. It might not be so bad, but whom are you opposing? You're opposing almost a cement wall of certain kind. So I don't think this team is good enough for that.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure talking to you.
I don't know whether I've said anything out of place, but
no,
but anyway.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Wish you.
Thank you.